I'm Doug Lichtman, and this is the first of two videos on copyright's fair use doctrine. Fair use is a special rule, and what it does is it allows the unauthorized copying of protected expression. That's actually a really important place to start. Fair use says we might have an example where there was expression, it was taken without permission, and yet we're going to wave it off. There's something about this fact pattern, this setting, this situation that's going to cause us to say no, even though a very traditional application of copyright law would declare this to be infringing. It's the unauthorized taking of protected expression. We'd normally say it's no good. There's something special going on, and we're going to forgive it. We're going to give a kind of a safety valve, an escape hatch for copyright law, and we literally allow judges to lean back in their chair, look at the situation and say, this time, for these really good reasons, no, I'm not enforcing copyright as I might in the normal rhythm of the law. That's kind of what fair use does. It's a very, very powerful rule that impacts a lot of cases that I think you and I would really care about. Let's start by looking at how Congress wrote it up. And I should warn you that Congress wrote it up, but it had already been in use. So judges had been using this. It's called an equitable doctrine. And what we mean to say when we say something is an equitable doctrine, we're just saying the courts had already had the freedom to kind of make this call on their own. When Congress came in to write it up in formal language, the legislative history makes clear that Congress wasn't trying to mess with it. Congress saw what the judges had been doing on their own in the power of equity, the power to be fair, and Congress wrote it up to try to reflect what the judges were doing, not to really change what the judges were doing. But Congress's version is really helpful to me and you. So let's take a look. This is section 107, the actual bit of law that establishes today fair use. Here's what Congress wrote. Congress wrote that notwithstanding the provisions of section 106 and a provision we haven't talked about, 106A, but notwithstanding the normal rules as to the rights you get, the right to control reproduction, derivative work, and so on, notwithstanding the normal rules, the fair use of a copyrighted work, including such use by reproduction, copies, or phonorecords, or by any other means, for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research, is not an infringement of copyright. And just pause there with me for a moment. There's this big list. It's not infringement if it's for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, research. I think of this as a nod to the First Amendment. Remember, the First Amendment said that Congress isn't supposed to make any law that abridges the freedom of speech. And of course, copyright is a law that does kind of that. Copyright limits speech. And so 107 comes in and points to some of the magic of the First Amendment, right? Why do we want free speech? Well, we want criticism and news reporting and commentary and community. And there are all these things the First Amendment was designed to help us protect. And so we get to 107, which is inside a law that's limiting speech. And Congress says, don't forget those values. If copyright is being used in ways that seem like it might be limiting criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, research, maybe we should pull our punches. And let's be real clear, you and me, this isn't a get out of jail free card. It's not like because I do a lot of teaching, everything I do is fair use. No. We're still going to look at this case by case. Some things I do are fine, some might not be. So for example, UCLA advises me that if I want to photocopy a news article and it just happened that morning and it's relevant to today's class, yeah, maybe I could just do it, even though I am taking protected expression without permission. Maybe because of the timing there, that's fair use in support of my teaching. But if instead I'm copying a news article to use in next year's class, probably not. So this is a list, again, I think of it as the First Amendment values, reminding us there are certain things we want to make sure we don't hamper. And so Congress lists a bunch of those categories out. Congress then went on and says, in determining whether the use made of a work in any particular case is a fair use, The factors to be considered shall include, and we get this list of considerations. Paragraph 1, setting the tone for the First Amendment values. Now we transition and say, hey, there are these factors that include, and we get this list. You might remember from prior videos the word include is defined in section 101, and it means here are some examples, but feel free to add more. And that's huge in these cases. I've actually litigated a ton of fair use cases, and I always take this as my anchor, because maybe my argument in this case fits beautifully in these factors. Great, use them. Maybe it doesn't though. Maybe the reason I chose this client, the reason I'm fighting for this client, is something that doesn't verbally fit nicely in this list. No big deal. I still can open my brief, I still can open my argument by pointing out the thing that actually moved me. Because include, again, opens the door. So Congress says First Amendment values, factors include, and we get these factors. Factor 1 is the purpose and character of the use, including whether such use is of commercial nature or nonprofit. And be careful here. I know Congress wrote it, and that's what it says, but as we've evolved through cases, we realize that, say, like the New York Times, well, they try to make a profit, and yet a lot of what the New York Times does falls into that First Amendment values bucket. And so just because they're trying to make money, that doesn't mean they're not eligible. And flipping it around, when the college kids were uploading music illegally to the internet to trade it, they weren't trying to make any money. But it's not like this factor favored them. What they were doing was hurting copyright holders, and we really focused on that. So factor 1, it says the purpose and character of the use, and then has that other stuff. The other stuff isn't as central as it might seem. Purpose and character of the use has become pretty central. What you see courts do, and we'll look at it, courts use this factor to ask, how transformative is the accused use? Did you borrow someone's expression and then do something meaningfully different with it? A totally different message, a totally different purpose? Did you really change the market? Did you make a big enough change? Tell me about the purpose, the character of the use. Courts talk about this as a look to see whether what you did is transformative. And the intuition is, if you're really transformative, that might be an argument as to why you shouldn't have had to ask, you shouldn't have to pay, why you shouldn't have to stay under the normal rules you can take because you're doing something wildly different. Now again, be careful. Derivative work is section 106.2. Copyright holders get to stop you from taking their stuff and doing something with it. And so if you take the characters from a book and do something totally different with them, maybe it's 106.2, you're in trouble. Maybe it's part of factor 1 of a fair use conversation. We have to be careful how we think about this, but the intuition for factor 1 is, if you're not doing something transformative, if you're just taking the expression and doing the same darn thing, same audience, same meaning, and so on, you don't have a good story. Why didn't you ask? Why didn't you pay? Right? Why aren't you in the normal system? By contrast, if you're really doing something quite different, you're commenting on the original, you're criticizing the original. If you're doing something quite different, that's an argument in favor potentially of fair use. That I am adding such value in this particular way that I don't want you to think of me as a 106.2 derivative work. Focus on what I brought. We'll look at it as we go. Factor 1. Factor 2, the nature of the copyrighted work. Here, sometimes the court is keying in on whether you're taking information from a work of pure fiction, in which case we might ask why, whether you're taking information from a factual resource, in which case we might be more open to it under the First Amendment values intuition. What is this work? Third factor is the amount and substantiality of the portion used out of the work as a whole. Courts here are more skeptical the more you take. If you take a little bit, that might be easier to sell than taking a lot. If you take something unimportant, that's easier. Something central, maybe we'll be a little bit more nervous. It's reminding us to look at what you took and how much you took. Lastly, factor 4 is the effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work. This is where the courts look at the harm you might do to the copyright community. What happens if we let you do this? What money are you taking away from copyright holders? And here it's really important to think big, not just this one copyright holder, but man, what happens if this becomes the law? What happens if your situation, I say, sure, that's fair use. Now, other situations crop up that are really similar. Those have to be fair use too, I guess. And we have to think of the impact in total. Like, how much will that change the economics for copyright holders? This one, ones like this particular one. How will it change the market? Because remember, we like copyright law. We made copyright law. We already drew a bunch of these lines. We gave certain rights. And so if you're coming in and doing something without asking, without paying, you're taking expression, I at least want to think about what's the impact on the copyright system that I was trying to create in the first instance. And indeed, I like to think of the factors as factor 1 and 4 pushing and pulling against each other, with 2 and 3 just reminding us of a couple of details to think about. But 1 is where I make my claim, say, look, let me do this. Look how different it is. Look how transformative it is. Look at the First Amendment values it delivers. Let me do this. And factor 4 is, oh, wait a minute. If we do that, aren't we undermining copyright law? It's a push and a pull. There are some really easy examples just to get us oriented inside fair use. For example, if I want to do a book review of your book, I think I breeze through this conversation. What am I doing? It's something transformative. I'm reviewing your book. I might take some of your expression, I'll quote something, maybe to make fun of it, maybe to praise it, I'll quote something from yours, but what I'm mainly doing is something transformative. It does have an impact on the market, but maybe a perfectly legit one. Like if my review says your book is great and people believe me, you sell more books, good for you. If my review says your book is really bad, conversely, you might suffer. But that's the merits. I think we're okay with that. And big picture, remembering again my point to you about the word include, big picture, I think I can champion book reviews by saying it's kind of a win-win. We can't live in a world where the only way to do an effective book review is to ask, may I review your book, please? Those reviews would not be credible. And so if we think book reviews in the aggregate help this market work, help us find good books, help us encourage the writing of good books, the publishing of good books, if we think book reviews help the market overall, this might be the only way to get it. A world where you have to ask, a world where you have to pay. We might not get book reviews to happen at the same rhythm. And look how I can talk that through, thinking about the economic impact of the book review, thinking about what it adds. That's kind of a fair use conversation that we would have if we were litigating book reviews, which turns out to be a really classic and settled example. Let me walk you through some cases, and the run of cases I want to think about in this video. Again, there'll be another one on some other issues, but here I want to think about the line between parody and commentary. And there have been a couple really famous cases that will help you think about fair use and fair use in this setting. So the most famous case involved the song Pretty Woman from the artist Roy Orbison. And the dispute was, Roy Orbison's song was pretty well known and pretty famous. The band Two Live Crew, rap band sort of vibe, they wanted to make a version of the song, and they said they were making fun of the original. And in making fun of the original, that was kind of their story. Parody is important. Making fun of stuff is important. It's like commentary. It's like book reviews. And of course, we can't ask. If we ask permission, can I take your song and mess with it to make fun of it? You would say no. You'll be thin-skinned. And even if you, Roy Orbison, wouldn't say no, artists like you would say no. And in essence, Two Live Crew said, if we want to make fun of a work, we have to borrow from that work. We'll try not to take too much, but we have to borrow from that work so we can call it to your mind. We're going to take from that work, we're going to make fun of it, and this is First Amendment values. This is transformative. Look how different our work is. We should be allowed to do it without asking, without paying. And they litigated the case. I'll give you a little taste just of the music. This is the Roy Orbison song. First, you probably know it.
woman walking down the street, pretty woman, the kind I like to meet, pretty woman. I don't believe you, you're not the truth. No one could look as good as
This is the Two Live Crew version of the song that they say was a parody. Okay, those are the two versions of the song. And again, we could talk about a lot of things. One thing that the court doesn't say a ton about, but I would have, is that really a parody? Are they really commenting on Roy Orbison's song? Are they just trying to get attention by using Roy Orbison's song? I think we would have arm wrestled a little bit if we were talking about it dynamically as to, are they really doing a parody? Because a big part of their fair use story was parody. Why didn't we ask? We're making fun of him. Why should you support us making fun of him? Because that's really important to culture and so on. If that weren't true, if it turns out that it's not a parody, but is some sort of other marketing gimmick, I think we'd be much less sympathetic. Another interesting thing here is Roy Orbison was really mad about this. And we need to focus on why. If he was just mad because they were making fun of him, I don't think the courts would be very sympathetic. But I think Roy Orbison was mad because what they did, whether effective or not, ruins his song. I just ruined it for you. For the rest of your life, when you hear the opening sounds of the song, you're gonna think of Big Hairy Woman instead of thinking of the Roy Orbison song. And I think Roy Orbison's probably pretty mad about that. Again, even if their criticism wasn't very good, having done this, they tainted his song a little bit. That plays into factor 4, economic harm. If we are too relaxed about this, if we allow every rap group to say, yeah, what I'm doing is a parody, well, then all of a sudden we're gonna have a lot of these things, and that really could impact the value of the original music. You can see the push and pull. Why might we allow it without forcing permission? Why might we be nervous about the economic impact over the long run across cases? And the Supreme Court famously, they said parody is transformative. So if it is parody, that really does weigh in favor of fair use. And then the court remanded for more information about the economics. How will this impact things? That takes us to the next case I want to show you. This involves a magazine cover. It's really famous, got a lot of attention at the time. The cover of Vanity Fair. You might recognize the actress Demi Moore. The photographer was a famous photographer named Annie Leibovitz. And Annie Leibovitz did the striking photo. Demi Moore, obviously pregnant in the photo. There was a messaging about the beauty of having a family, the pressures women surely feel as they're figuring out going from famous actress and so on to adjusting to these physical changes. There's a whole thing here, I think, designed to be wonderfully empowering, to endorse, like, this is awesome, go do this, don't worry about it, it's beautiful. I think there was a messaging here. Front cover of Vanity Fair got a ton of attention. Years later, the actor Leslie Nielsen was promoting a movie, Naked Gun. It was the third one in the series of Naked Gun movies that he did, and so it was Naked Gun 33 and a third. And well, you see what he did. He made a version of the photo as his movie poster. That's not his real body. Yeah, okay, good. He superimposed his head on the body of a pregnant woman and do this march. He's playing with the photo. They litigate, they fight about this. You can see everybody's moves. Leslie Nielsen will say, I'm making fun of how seriously they took themselves. He also would say, that's kind of what the Naked Gun movies are all about. Those movies are about making fun of other movies. And so for the poster, he made fun of a photo. On the other hand, the copyright holder, here Annie Leibovitz, the photographer, she might say, gosh, that destroys so much value. you doing this undermines my ability to do other things with this copyrighted image, let alone images like it. You can imagine, for instance, that she was thinking about doing a coffee table book, powerful women in their moment of pregnancy, and trying to really lean into this theme. Well, after Leslie Nielsen does this, it might be really hard to do that. Pushing and pulling, what's the impact on the marketplace? What is the transformative use? And again, I always worry, is, in this case, Leslie Nielsen, is he really doing it to comment on the original work? Or is he just trying to make money? Is he just trying to get attention? Is he just trying to be funny? I think that would really matter as we run through factor one. Another one, love this case. You know, that Dr. Seuss, one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. Well, at the time of the O.J. Simpson criminal trial, you probably remember O.J. Simpson was a football player. He was accused of killing his ex-wife and another person. It was a big deal trial. It was actually horrible to live through as a lawyer, because the trial really was treated like it was entertainment rather than a search for truth. It was televised, nonstop, gavel to gavel. A lot of it was just showmanship rather than good, intense inquiry to figure out what really happened. It was a horrible moment for the criminal justice system. Afterward, a really creative person said, I want to write a book about this, but I'm going to do it in the Dr. Seuss style, using the Dr. Seuss style to make fun of the O.J. Simpson trial, the criminal justice system, and so on. And they did a book. They had an O.J. Simpson-like character wearing the hat, and they had pages like one knife, two knife, red knife, dead wife, right, playing off the facts of the criminal trial. Again, is it fair use? Here, the courts turned out to be really skeptical of it. The author who did it wanted to say it's totally transformative. I took the Dr. Seuss stuff, I moved it to a whole new experience, used it for a different purpose. I get it, there's some economics here, having done this, but maybe not so bad. It's not like people are going to accidentally buy the O.J. Simpson book when they went to go buy a Dr. Seuss book, or maybe they're not even going to hold Dr. Seuss accountable. It's not going to have the taint problem that we talked about with Roy Orbison, or although maybe it will. Maybe now when you're reading One Fish, Two Fish, you're going to think of this conversation. But a struggle back and forth about economic impact, how transformative. It's interesting, the author who did this work, I think, had to admit at the end that he wasn't making fun of Dr. Seuss. And so he wasn't literally following the cases like the Roy Orbison case, where the argument is it's transformative because it's a parody. The author in this instance was doing social commentary. They were using Dr. Seuss, sure, but not to make fun of Dr. Seuss. They were using it just to show how childish and foolish this criminal trial came across. And on the one hand, that weakens their case. If I'm making fun of you, it follows very naturally that I say, well, I've got to borrow you. If I want to make fun of your work, I need to use your work. Whereas here, it's not clear this author had to use Dr. Seuss's work to do what he wanted to do. So on the one hand, it hurts his case. On the other hand, when you talk about the economic harm, you might be tempted to say, I don't care. I think of the pattern here. Let's say Dr. Seuss is harmed. Let's say by doing this, it hurts sales a little bit, it taints him a little bit. You might say, I don't care. Dr. Seuss has been so unbelievably successful that I'm not going to worry that if we allow this kind of case, we're going to undermine the incentive to be Dr. Seuss. Folks will know that if they get to that stratospheric level of success, yeah, we might allow some fair use that lets other people use their stuff to do something important. Here's social commentary on an important issue. But I don't know that that would really undermine the incentive to work hard to be Dr. Seuss. You'd know you still have lots and lots of runway. Only in these weird, rare, extreme cases might we allow fair use. But it's different. It's certainly not a parody case. It raises different tensions about what was being done. Here, I think the transformative nature was social commentary, not parody. And again, the economics. It might impact Dr. Seuss, but I don't know how much I care big picture over time about hurting someone who's been that successful. It's not going to come up that often. Alice Randall published this book, Wind on Gone, reflecting back on Gone with the Wind. But as you can tell, maybe even from the title, flipping it around to tell it from a different perspective. And Alice Randall's pitch was Gone with the Wind told the story from the perspective of the very wealthy landowners and the like. Wind and Gone flips it around and looks at the story from the perspective of the folks who were working hard and suffering and had limited rights, maybe telling a little more honest tale of what life was like at this time in this part of the country. Is she making fun of Gone with the Wind? Well, her lawyers said so. But I don't know, it doesn't seem right to me. I don't think she's making fun of it. I think she's doing powerful social commentary. And yes, like the previous case, she borrowed something really famous to get attention and to also make her job easier. Here, by borrowing Gone with the Wind, she right away puts you in the right setting. You know what time period we're thinking of. You have a sense of what the interactions are like. She borrowed from someone else, I don't think to make fun of, but to more effectively deliver her social commentary. It's not a classic parody case. It does seem to me transformative. When you think about the economics, I don't know, tough. Margaret Mitchell's estate said this will hurt their ability to do their own follow-up books, prequels, sequels, and so on. Of course, when I say Margaret Mitchell's estate, I'm already not all that sympathetic. Margaret Mitchell's family made a lot of money on this already. It's been a very successful property. If she makes a little less money, I don't know that we really messed up anything big picture. But again, the push and pull. How transformative is it? What's the economic harm? Another one of these tough cases in this line. Let me show you one more. Family Guy got in a big fight with Walt Disney Company over one of the Family Guy episodes. You know this song.
And you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are.
That's the classic song that Disney uses today, almost as a stand-in for, hey, we're Disney, kind of like you'd use a logo. It's When You Wish Upon a Star, classic Disney song. Family Guy, well, they did this.
I gotta get a Greenstein or a Rosenblatt of my very own. Nothing else has worked so far, so I'll wish upon a star, wondrous dancing speck of light. I need a Jew. Lois makes me take the rap, 'cause our checkbook looks like crap. Since I can't give her a slap, I need a Jew. Where to find a Baum or Steen or Stein to teach me how to whine and do my taxes.
So much to say. So they actually litigated. Can you imagine the powerhouse litigation here over that clip from a Family Guy episode? Run through the push and pull again. Family Guy wanted to say it's transformative. This should be fair use. And they had this interesting move because they said what we're really doing is making fun of Walt Disney the man, because Walt Disney the man is rumored to have been anti-Semitic. And so we made this song that says these horrible things, but we're pointing out to our audience this criticism of Disney, the Disney company, Walt Disney the man, and the like. And interestingly, they said, even if our audience at first wouldn't have realized that, that's okay. Because, and they put in great evidence along these lines, they said, folks, watch Family Guy, and you see after the episode airs, Google searches take off on whatever it was that Family Guy made fun of. And so they said, even if the average viewer wouldn't have known about Disney and his bad reputation, having done this, folks would have gone to Google and learned. And so what we're doing is criticism, parody. We're really targeting the original. One of the other fun things in this case, the folks behind Family Guy put in evidence to say, we don't even need to get to fair use. And their story along these lines was, we didn't take the expression. If you play those songs together, what you realize is we didn't actually take any of their notes. We went to our music team, we said we'd like a song that kind of evokes the orchestral qualities of the original, but please don't borrow anything too closely. And part of what their argument was is, don't even go to fair use. We didn't borrow expression, we're done. We referenced Disney, we have a little star in our image, whatever it is, but we didn't take expression. Again, push and pull, transformative, maybe, why did you take it? The fight always has to be, why didn't you ask? Why didn't you pay? Right? That's got to be where we start. And here I think Family Guy has a really good story. Disney would never have let us do this. So if it is expression, if we shouldn't have taken it along those lines, and again, they didn't concede that. They said their song was different enough. But if it is the taking of expression, their point is we couldn't have asked. And so if you want to let us make fun of this kind of thing or criticize this kind of thing, we need to do it through fair use. Don't make us ask, don't make us pay, let us just do it. And interestingly, they won their case. They were able to do this. You can get the box set and actually watch that episode. What have we done so far under the fair use banner? What we've done, I think, is pointed out there are a bunch of different seemingly related cases that we've got to disentangle. Maybe you're borrowing expression because you're making fun of or commenting on the work. If so, that's a pretty good argument under factor one. Why am I taking your work without asking? I want to make fun of it. And if I ask, you're going to say no. So my only plausible path is fair use. Maybe. There are cases like When Done Gone, and maybe the Dr. Seuss O.J. Simpson case, where it's a little different. I'm using your work to say something important. And here, again, I'm transformative, and maybe my story is, while it does hurt you economically, maybe you should be forced to just deal with that. Because this is, in essence, copyright law hurting you a tiny bit. You're super famous, you made plenty of money, Dr. Seuss. Hurting you a tiny bit, but allowing us then to do something First Amendment values like. A really important conversation we need to have about the South, When Done Gone, about the criminal justice system, O.J. Simpson. Maybe even if I'm not parody, maybe I have a story. We then, for some of these cases, at least have to worry that the taking is just using the work for fun or profit. I'm taking it just to get attention for myself, and man, that begins to look a lot like 106.2 derivative work. You better ask, you better pay. We're not trying to build a system where you can just take stuff. All right, that's all I want to cover in this video. We mainly focused on this run of parody, social commentary, largely to help us get some experience thinking about what does it mean to be transformative, how different, what does it mean to ask about economic harm, and I think the most important message me to you, the real question here is, why didn't you ask permission? Why shouldn't you have to pay? If we can understand that, that usually crystallizes why it might need to be fair use. And then again, we got to weigh that against, well, what harm? If this is fair use, if that becomes the law, well, now what? How much impact will a law like that, a rule like that, have on the copyright system?